Okay, let's spend a few minutes using the Pythagorean theorem, both on paper for math problems and in the real world. Okay, so let's remind ourselves first of what the Pythagorean theorem says. It says for any right triangle, if it has leg lengths of a and b and a hypotenuse of c, then we know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. In other words, the sum of the measures of the squares of the measures of the two legs will equal the square of the measure of the hypotenuse. Easier to just say a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, so let's do an example here. We have a right triangle here with legs of length 3 and 4 and a hypotenuse of c. So we can ask ourselves, well, what does c equal? Well, first let's go ahead and set up our a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but let's put in the a and b there. So we have 3 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. Let's go ahead and rearrange that to say c squared equals, and then 3 squared is 9, plus 4 squared is 16. And so we have c squared equals 25. We take the square root of both sides, and we get c equals 5. So that was pretty easy. We understand that we can calculate when we know these two sides. We can calculate that third side, the hypotenuse. C is 5. Let's do another example here. It says a right triangle has one leg with length 3.2 and a hypotenuse with length 4.2. What is the length of the other leg? And it says round our answer to the nearest tenth. So it's always a good idea to draw a picture here to make sure that we understand this. So let's go ahead and set that up. So here we have one leg with the length 3.2. It's a right triangle, and the hypotenuse has length of 4.2. And we're asking ourselves, what's the other leg? So we've labeled that B here. So now we can set up our Pythagorean theorem equation. Let's go ahead and do that. So we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared, or in other words, 3.2 squared plus b squared, which we don't know, equals 4.2 squared. Makes sense? Okay, now it's really just a matter of doing the math. You can do it by hand or with the calculator here, but that would be 10.24 plus b squared equals 17.64. So I've just squared 3.2 and 4.2. Now we'll subtract 10.24 from both sides to get the b squared by itself. So now we have b squared equals 7.4. When we use our calculator to take the square root of both sides there, we find that b equals 2.72029, and the decimal keeps going. But the problem asked us to round to the nearest tenth, so we know that b equals 2.7, and that's our answer. Okay, so super useful for math problems. And those problems are often about real-world situations. Let's look at one of those. It says, Alfreda is a firefighter saving a cat trapped at the top of a vertical tree. She leans a 10-meter ladder against the tree, touching at exactly the cat's position. The base of the ladder is 3.1 meters from the tree. How high is the cat? And then it says, again, round our answer to the nearest tenth of a meter. So, what step would you probably take first here? Definitely, I would say, let's draw a picture. That will help us to understand this. So first, let's draw a tree there. And one of the things it says about the tree is that it's a vertical tree, which means it's going to hit the ground at a right angle. So let's go ahead and put a right angle measure in there. And we know that there's a cat up in that tree, so let's go ahead and draw that. And then we understand that the firefighter, Alfreda, she leans a 10-meter ladder up against the tree, and it touches exactly at the cat's position. So let's draw that in right there. And then you can say, we have a right triangle here. And that, let's go ahead and put in some of the measures that we know on the right triangle. So that hypotenuse is the ladder, and we know that that's 10 meters. Okay? And then the problem also tells us that the base of the ladder is 3.1 meters from the tree. So that's that length right there of the triangle. So here we have two sides of this, well, we have a leg and a hypotenuse of this right triangle, and we want to find how high the cat is. Well, that's just B, the other leg of the right triangle. So now this problem is starting to look very similar to the examples we did just a moment ago. We can set up the equation again with a squared plus b squared equals c squared, putting in the numbers that were given in the problem. And now we can start solving the problem. We just square 3.1 to get 9.61, and we square 10 to get 100. And now we want to get b squared by itself, so we'll subtract 9.61, and b squared then is 90.39. You probably want to use a calculator for this next step, which is to take the square root of both sides. So on the left-hand side, the square root of b squared is just going to be b. And when you use your calculator, 90.39 is the square root of that is 9.50737, and it keeps going on for a long time. But the problem asks us to round to the nearest tenth of a meter, so we can say that b equals 9.5. Okay, now what does that mean, though? Going back to the problem, what were we trying to find? Yeah, it was the height of the cat. So we can say the cat is at 9.5 meters high. And that's our answer. So that's how the Pythagorean theorem is really useful, both for just regular math problems and in the real world.